Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Protecting Your Business event with ACS and SKOUT. We're just going to give everybody a few minutes just to jump in and attend, and we'll get cracking. I should just say, during the course of the webinar, if you have any questions, if you can use the Q&A function and just drop your question in text, we'll endeavour to pick them up as we go through and at the end as well, and answer those. Okay, I think 32 attendees. I think we should kind of get cracking. So my name's Steve Harley. I'm the pre-sales director here at ACS. I look after our solutions and security sales process in the background, making sure that we've got the right people on board. And I'll let JP and then James introduce themselves.
Stephen, JP Kyo from SKOUT Cybersecurity. I run the business here in Europe for SKOUT, and just want to thank you very much, Stephen, for giving us the opportunity today to jump on and say hello.
No worries. James?
And yeah, thanks, Stephen. So James Mason, one of the sales engineers here at SKOUT. So my focus is kind of technical evangelism of the SKOUT cybersecurity stack and cybersecurity in general. After spending 15 or so years in IT, I've got a love and hate relationship with cybersecurity, as we can all imagine. But yeah, happy to be on. And again, echoing JP, thanks very much for bringing us on today.
Marvellous. So we'll move away from that awful pre-lockdown photo of me when I had hair. I'm sure everybody can appreciate. So look, just a little bit of background about ACS, if you don't know who we are already. We've been in business now for just over 25 years. We have 4 strands to our business, which is headquartered in Northampton. We have our cybersecurity offering and capabilities, which encompass cyber essentials, vulnerability assessment, and some security as a service offerings, and of course partnership with SKOUT. We then have our technology, which is providing anything and everything from a laptop through to core infrastructure, cloud solutions, and everything in between. We have communications, so looking after Microsoft Teams, making sure that you've got the right environment for those Teams rooms, Zoom rooms, etc., and also cloud telephony. And then for many years now, we've had our interiors division, bringing all those together and delivering out the office space and the workplace environment. So making sure that delivers out for our clients. And so yeah, that's who we are. I'll let JP tell us a little bit more about our Compartment Scout.
Yeah, no, thank you, Stephen. And I'm not going to labour on some of the detail you see. You can see for yourself there. But I suppose we're, number one, very proud to be a partner of ACS and really an extension of your team, Stephen. ACS have taken a real proactive stance around cybersecurity in over the last a year or so in partnering with us. And I think you and I talk about this all the time, Stephen. The main issue is not necessarily technology when it comes to cybersecurity. The main issue right now is this tremendous lack of talent. There's a lack of talent globally. 4 million open cyber positions today. So that huge shortage of talent, frankly, people don't know what that really means. And it's great there's so many people on the call today, and thank you everyone for taking some time. But what it means to you, you're running your business, whether it be small, large enterprise, it's very difficult to get access to the right people to help around cybersecurity, and that's only going to exacerbate over the next number of years. So the main issues we see across the globe, we're headquarters in North America, and the European business is based in Ireland, supporting the UK, and really the main issues we're seeing are focused around phishing, business email compromise, ransomware, both of which we're going to touch on today. James is actually going to do a live demo of an attack for those who have interest in seeing that. It's really powerful, but really been able to focus on those two areas. And then there's other things like regulations are driving the need more and more. Maybe folks on this call, Stephen, have had requests from their customers, or indeed have to comply with regulations. So the bar is rising all the time. So what we do together is we pull tools and services into one place to help make it easy and affordable for particularly for small to medium businesses. That partnership is 24/7 in terms of some of the services. So that's a little bit about how we're seeing the problem right now. And like Stephen, you're when you think about the digitalization of everything, cybersecurity is becoming more and more important. It's only been accelerated with things like COVID. Do you probably see it yourself, Stephen, across the customer base?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, I've just so in the background, JP, I know that it looks like we're having a few problems with the video, but I'm sure it's going to come back in a moment, and Sarah will be working on that in the background for us. So we'll continue chatting. You'll just have to listen to our dulcet tones. Yeah, we definitely see that. I mean, the lack of talent that you alluded to, really is a challenge. Finding good skilled people en masse to deal with the scale that we're facing, certainly is challenging out there. Yeah. So even the largest organisations are struggling to have that. So having partners like SKOUT that have that talent available is really, really important. Yeah. And we also see a lot of that email compromise happening day in, day out.
Yeah.
And kind of that's scaling out then into that work from home environment, where you've got this situation where previously maybe an email would come into an organization and it would be suspicious, and everybody's in an open office environment, and they would somebody would see it and they would recognize that it was suspicious and say, hey, look, that's a problem. Yeah. And you've got that interaction with people. You don't have that at the same time anymore with people working from home, and so there's a delay. So somebody's got to send you an email or got to send you a private message, etc., to tell you not to click on the email you've already received. So that immediacy, working from home really does factor in. People are out of sight and a bit less connected in many ways.
Yeah. It's funny. At the same time, you're talking about lack of talent, and at the same, it's like a compound effect, Stephen. So at the same time, you have that shortage of talent, and again, folks in this call will probably recognize this within their own business. There's more devices, more data. Your perimeters, the way in which you secure your environment, it's becoming more blurred than ever before, because you got the acceleration to the cloud, the migration to the cloud, I should say, and it's given the opportunities for bad actors to undertake some of those attacks you're talking about, and it's really like a perfect storm right now, Stephen. Attacks are more sophisticated, the autonomy of an attack has changed, and it's becoming easier, and no longer do we have to talk about this problem, and it's really become its own risk management bucket for small businesses now, and that's why the multi-layered approach is so important. It's important to have the controls in place that you talk about, and we can touch on it in a moment around some of those controls. And James, as I said, maybe it might be a good time for you to touch on this as well. When we think about the two main problems out there, business email compromise, like what does that mean? What does that look like? And then even ransomware. So I know you have elements to to go through there. If it'd be great to walk us through a little bit.
Yeah, sure, happily. I think, there are, some of the major problems out there that we're seeing, are, how do attackers get into networks so easily? Business email, it's really the easiest way to get in, right? You send enough attack types, enough phony emails that look legitimate, and eventually people will be able to get in, because there's always one person, right? That'll click something. Yeah, absolutely, right. And Stephen, you guys are definitely going to be at the forefront of this and being able to see that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had clients over the course of the last 18 months, 2 years, where they've received invoices that have been doctored, that have different details on them, and defrauded. And quite often, when you trace that back, somebody somewhere, either at the sending or receiving end, has been compromised. Typically with either having the same passwords or on multiple sites, and that site's been compromised. They've used that to log into Office 365. But yeah, that's a real thing that we're seeing. Probably every couple of weeks, there's somebody's been attempted to be defrauded, and I think you were going to show us, James, a little bit of luck if the demo gods will come back to us and people can see your screen, exactly how those sorts of attacks happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me bring this up for everyone, and I can kind of explain what we're looking at here before I kick it all off. So
just make sure that everyone can see that for us. So if anyone's on the Q&A, can you just confirm that that's actually showing, because I know that we've had some issues during the call.
Great.
Yeah, it looks like they're good. Brilliant. So
sensational. Look at that. The demo gods are being kind today. So what this is, for everyone on the call, this is going to be a brief look into an attack. So this is my attack machine we're currently looking at, and I'm going to transition back and forth. Now, I'll try and keep up to speed with my transitions and stuff. I move kind of quickly. But we're going to be looking at a pretty standard business email compromise attack. The one that we're going to be looking at is, I'm going to be sending out a brand impersonation email, and you can see here I've got kind of that Microsoft accounts team email here, where I'm going to be saying, hey, something's weird with your account, you need to do something about it. And I'm going to throw a link in, send it out to the victim, and we'll see what happens from there. So let's create this attack. So we're going to be doing a Microsoft attack. I'm going to let it run in its own system. Now, Zfisher is a pretty standard tool within a kind of nefarious toolkit, if you will. So it's a tool that attackers will use pretty regularly, and it will basically create me a link here that's going to look very legitimate. So give it a second. It takes a second or two to spin up, because there you go. Has to kind of drag this in. So we'll throw that into this email. We'll get this sent out to my victim, and hopefully they'll click it. So let's send that, and we'll transition over to the victim machine now to see what their view is. There we go. So we've got this email that's come in here. We'll click the link. And as you can see, we've got a very legitimate looking email or login for Microsoft. So I'm going to throw my details in here. And we're going to ignore the URL, the link at the top. And I'll log in here, and away we go. And this is just going to spin away. And if we transition back to my attack machine, we'll see what's actually happened. So now you can see I have the username and password of that user. So that link, that attack was basically aimed at creating a Microsoft-looking website. We saw that looked really legitimate, right? You'd be pretty fooled by that. But we've created that website. They've put in their credentials, and now I have the username, the password, even all the way up to their IP address you see just above there. And I can do a multitude of different things. I'm going to just touch on very quickly here the fact that they had a very secure password. They're not using pets' names, kids' names, birthdays, favorite holiday places, or anything like that. right? As we all know that we do. It's just human nature. You need a password to be memorable, so use something that is easy to remember. But there are password saving tools and password creation tools all over the place these days. And that's definitely something to have a chat with Stephen and the folks at ACS about. Yeah, how can we have a better foothold in password security? But in this case, the unfortunate truth is it didn't matter. You know, we had a very secure password here, and because there's no level of email protection for the business email there, we're back in the same situation. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to log into their email now. So we'll just dump in their super secure password, and we'll sign in. We're sure we'll stay signed in, and yeah, we're now in. And this is really where part 2 comes in. So what am I going to do now, right? What do I have the capabilities of doing? So I have full access to their 365 account. So now I'm going to go into phase 2, which is setting up a forwarding rule. And this is really one of the most common ways of doing a really solid business email compromise. So we'll call this something pretty inconspicuous. And I'm going to say I want any emails that have a subject that includes, and I could do subject or body, but we'll just do subject. And I'm going to go for wire transfer. This could be invoice. It could be, you know, Stephen, you touched on invoice.
Yeah, that's what we see a lot of. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to say, well, I'm going to forward this to you. But like I said, you know, it could be invoice. It could be bank information. It could be, you know, credit card. I could put in any terminology I want here. And my action is I'm going to forward this to my attack email. So I'm basically just saying any emails forward to me that have wire transfer or invoice, whatever. And I could add another like thing in there saying, oh, delete that locally. If I wanted to, I could go in and say, oh, you know, I never want Stephen to see that email. I want to get that email. I want it to be deleted locally. So Stephen, you just be sat to go, well, why is no one sending me emails? Yeah. You know, things like this are incredibly hard to find. You know, admin is a subject for the rule. I could call it anything, you know, Microsoft ATP rule -1375.2214. Who's going to look at that, right? So we're going to save this. And there we go. And we're back on the victim machine now. And as if by magic, maybe give it another kick here. Hey, as if by magic, we've got an email specifically with that set of parameters in. So obviously from here, we're going to see what happens next. So very simply, if I go back to my my attack machine, this is my attack email, good old AOL. I now have that information. I have the ability now to go in and do whatever I want with that attack, that victim email.
And that's what we're seeing an awful lot of. We're seeing attacks like that, James, where people are intercepting invoices coming in. They're not being seen by the intended recipient. They're being forwarded. They're then being amended and then represented in. And so these are live projects. So you're expecting the invoice from this supplier. Everything on it, the PO, the line items, all of that will match up exactly what you're expecting to see. The only thing that will be different will be where it's come in from. If you spot that, and they'll spoof it and make it look as convinced they can, and then the bank details will get paid. So we're seeing an awful lot of that. So yeah, that bounce from that demo. That's a real risk, and we see people pay that money out, not realizing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's you've got to give it to the attackers. They know what they're doing, right? They know how to socially engineer an attack so that people are going to do what they want to.
And they're in, and there's probably 2 or 3 opportunities there to stop that attack, isn't there? If you think about it, there's the awareness of that email coming in and not clicking that link, if you're not expecting it, and training. There's the multi-factor authentication that you could have around your password security, so that it doesn't matter that they've got the code. Then unless they act on it instantly, they've got a problem. And then of course when they start setting up forwarding rules and the like, it's having somebody like SKOUT monitoring what's going on with the environment and saying, well, hang on a second, this new rule's been set up. Is that legitimate? Is that right? And bringing that to attention of ACS or the IT partner.
I think
absolutely.
Stephen, no, that's a great message though as well. That, you know, the attack surface is changing, the dynamic within the threat landscape is changing. The need now is for strong partnerships. So if you're a small business, making sure you develop strong partnerships with the likes of ACS, because this is an evolving piece. And you know, actually, I know, James, you're going to show ransomware in a moment, and no other malware type has evolved so much in the last 12 months as ransomware. We've seen, I think, something like, I've seen figures as 400% increase, you know, in the last 12 months on ransomware. So the sheer number of attacks, it's becoming more sophisticated. So maybe, James, it'd be great to sort of touch on that component as well, to learn a little bit more about ransomware.
Yeah, sure. So everyone's going to be seeing my screen again here. But before I kind of kick this ransomware off and we can start looking and viewing exactly what ransomware does, ransomware's been around for years. There was an ASCII conference way back when that first hypothesized that ransomware could be, or sorry, not an ASCII, it was an IEEE event even. Too many events these days. So IEEE, and we're talking like back in the 80s, where they were like, one day, you know, data is going to be so important that, you know, people are going to hold that to ransom. And, you know, the invention of kind of a shift of encryption and things like that is going to make it very difficult. And lo and behold, in 1989, the first ransomware was seen in the wild. It was called the AIDS Trojan. And it was actually a professor that was working towards a cure for AIDS, for HIV. And he used his title, he used his status to send out floppy disks. And I don't mean the, you know, the floppy disks that we're all, well, hopefully we're all keyed into. We're talking the big old school ones that were actually floppy. Showing my age a little. And he sent those out and said, hey, if you want to learn more about how to prevent AIDS, then, you know, load this up. And people were doing it because it came from this doctor. And it encrypted the machine with a very, very basic encryption. You know, we could break that in like seconds today. However, back in those days, you know, computing wasn't as good as it was, so it did its job very well. The interesting thing is he got caught, and this is where like ransomware has moved on. He got caught because he asked for payment for that, but he said, send me a check to my home address. Now, I'm not a criminal mastermind, but I'm pretty sure if you put your home address as, you know, the payment location, you're going to get a knock on the door. And he did. He got caught by the FBI, and the silver lining to this is all the money that he extorted out. Like, everyone got their money back. The FBI paid everyone. All of the money that he was taking in, he was actually putting into the AIDS Foundation. So, you know, there is the silver lining of the money went to good use. But, you know, since then, we've seen ransomware move on and on and on. You know, 2012, 2013, massive influx of ransomwares, up to today, where we're seeing RSA 4096 level encryption. We're seeing, you know, systems that are doing crazy things. So let's kind of transition into this ransomware that we're going to be looking at today. So let's set the scene. I did a little bit of drama class back in the day. So I've just come back off holiday. It was a great holiday, and I left my machine on whilst I was away, and I wanted to, you know, get some updates done. IT told me it was fine. And I need to get back to work. My boss is screaming at me that, you know, my sales are way behind, so I took 2 weeks. How dare I? But, you know, it was great. And so I'm going to load up Chrome, and I want to get into Salesforce. And whilst I double click that, I'm telling people left and right, oh, I went to Bali and I saw monkeys and it was great and there was dolphins. and I'm ignoring what's happening on the screen here. And what we're seeing is the encryption is starting to take hold. And that chrome.exe, that's actually, it's not chrome.exe. That's going to be our ransomware. And it's going through it, scanning the system for .docs, .docx, Excel files, PDFs, you name it, anything that it can encrypt. And I'm still ignoring it, left and right. Stephen, I had a great holiday. I loved it,
Did you get out and cycle a bit?
God, no, absolutely not. I lay on the beach drinking pina coladas. And then all of a sudden this happens and this catches my eye. And I look back, I'm like, what is this? And then I don't know what this is. And I'm like, what do you mean changes to my computer? Oh, I guess it's something that the IT team did. Okay, cool. I'll click yes. And then the final piece of the puzzle kicks in where the ransomware itself will delete out all the original files and it will offload the encryption key out to the cloud. And what we're seeing here is very simply, I've encrypted your machine. You have 3 days to pay the ransom. If you do not pay it in 3 days, I'll double the ransom amount. If you do not pay it in 7 days, I'm going to delete that ransom key. And this is an old version of ransomware. This is WannaCry from when WannaCry first came out, and it's only asking for $300 worth of Bitcoin. Bitcoin being the cryptocurrency of choice for most attackers, and it's nigh untraceable. But when we look at this, and when we look at what's happened since, the average price of ransom that we saw in the last year is $100,000. And they're not just saying, pay me $100,000 and you get your data back. They're saying, pay me $100,000 and I'll give you your data back, but then pay me the double amount for me not to release the files I stole on the dark web to the highest bidder. So it's getting worse and worse. And ransomware really is not going away anytime soon.
That's a really interesting point there you've just made, James, about the threat in the blackmail element to send that out. I mean, we're seeing ransomware attacks continue to happen today, particularly in education most recently, and you're starting to see anywhere where there's not as mature security standpoints being hit. But then you can have the best backups in the world to recover your data, but if you're really worried about it being published and being disseminated because it's private information, because there's those GDPR links, and you think about the fines for losing that kind of data and it getting out into the wild, all of a sudden, it's not just as good enough to say, okay, well, I've got my data back, that's great, but so has everybody else. So right. That it's a very interesting angle that you raised there, James.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think when we look at some of the attacks that have happened recently, over here, I'm actually based in the Stephen, this. I'm based in the US, and over here we had the Colonial Pipeline attack, where they ransomware is the term. Basically one of the main lines that feeds oil and gasoline out to the US, and they paid somewhere between $30 and $40 million to get that back. And we saw another one that was it was a game developer. I won't saw their name, but there was a game developer that was hit with $100 million ransom. They didn't pay. They managed to negotiate. They managed to get their data back because they actually stole personnel files, unreleased game engine data, loads of stuff. And they were threatening to sell it on the dark web. So, these guys have millions and millions of dollars worth of technology and equipment there, and they're still being attacked. So we really need to put, JP and I talk about this all the time, concentric layers of security. Yeah. Having the onion, the core of that onion being your data, and all the layers of that onion building around it being every single layer of security that you can imagine, and doing everything possibly can there.
Definitely, and it's a good point for sure, James. Like maybe what people see on their screen right now, when you think about those things we've just seen, Stephen, and James, great job there going through those examples. It's becoming more difficult, unfortunately. So, but that said, there's basic cyber hygiene that today can help you as a small business. And ACS do a marvelous job at, as you just said, James, protecting the critical data. So again, folks on the call, think about, your financial information, your HR information, that critical data that, should there be an issue with it, it would keep you up at night. So where is that at today? How are you protecting it? So again, those concentric rings of security, some people call that the cyber kill chain. So what does that mean? Well, if your firewall misses something, or your endpoint, your email protection, like we've seen, what else have you got in place to pick it up? So they're the absolute table stakes now. You need to continuously work with partners like ACS to help build those controls. You mentioned, Stephen, two-factor, all of that. So again, getting a partner to help you navigate that piece. I think the next element is certainly part of the service that SKOUT provide, but it'll be too self-serving for us to talk about that today. But as a basic principle, think about that critical data, and you're protecting it, but you have to know you have a problem. In the UK now, the average length of time from when something happens in your environment to when you know about it is 197 days. So it's like 200 days from when something happens to when you know about it. And James gave an example of things like business email compromise. So when that first happened, it just sits there and listens and learns. And as you said, Stephen, examples of invoice redirection, whatever it might be. But the average length of time, the best analogy, we all know, when you leave your home, you protect your home by locking your doors and windows. That's the equivalent of those firewalls and endpoints. And it stops the opportunistic burglar, but you need visibility, you need monitoring. So again, monitoring your environment is the key piece, and having that visibility, it reduces the response time down, Stephen, and that's actually the service that we work together on. But making sure that when something happens, like an account getting compromised, or in your emails being auto forwarded to a certain bad actor, whatever that activity is, you need to know you have it, so it reduces the response time. And then I think the other message for everyone today is, pick a framework that makes sense, continuously take a proactive approach. And in summary, what it really means is that today, particularly around cybersecurity, because of the pace at which the market is moving, doing nothing is the equivalent of going in reverse. So you have to continuously take a proactive, and those who are on the call are doing so by even listening in today, but working with a partner like ACS to help take it from A to B. And that's the key message from us today, Stephen.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, JP, and it's really important there. You mentioned the building concentric rings of security around the data, and that's really illustrated. When we were talking about that email compromise, about that there being 3, maybe 4 different opportunities there to intercede and stop an attack from progressing before you get down to somebody paying some money out, for example. And we particularly at ACS, we rate the Cyber Essentials framework and qualification through the British government and the National Centre for Cybersecurity. We think that's a good foundation, but it really is important to keep reviewing, as you say. What are you doing around cybersecurity? What approaches and systems you have in place? What training are you putting out there to protect people? So we'll do some questions in a moment, but one of the things we do want to offer everybody on the call today, if you do get in touch, we do a free cybersecurity assessment where we'll sit down and we'll run through with you some key questions, get an understanding of where you are and starting to help target and work out how you continue to develop that. So if you get in contact afterwards, then we can certainly help you there. We do have some questions though, JP, and James, if you're still there as well.
Yeah.
The first question that's come up is what industries?
Any difficult ones, go to James, and I'll take anything else.
Thanks.
So what industries do hackers target the most? I don't know what the stats are, JP and James, what you're seeing out there. we see all sorts is the reality at the moment. Everything from education's been in a big target over the course of the last few months in the UK, and with some pretty well publicised. But you mentioned oil, manufacturing, financial services. You know, it doesn't seem that there's many that are immune.
Yeah, I might take the first part, but again, I think you're 100% correct. It has evolved over time. So traditionally, when you think about financial and healthcare, very much a target, but because it's becoming easier for bad actors to undertake, small businesses now in general, regardless of sector, are certainly seeing a marked increase. And I think that is going to continue. As we said earlier, it's now really become its own risk management bucket. It's no longer a situation where cybersecurity is seen as the problem for the IT person. This is really a focus for business owners now today. How can I get that layered approach? How can I understand what does good look like? Where am I today? If I take a 1 to 5, am I a 2? Am I a 4? Understanding that and understanding what the next best step is to continue to improve. But James, something else?
Mm-hmm. No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that when we're looking at cyber attacks in general, it's interesting when you think about it. You hear about the high-profile cases in the news. You hear about
right.
I gave the examples, the Colonial, the game developers, things like that. There was the supply chain attack that happened end of last year, start of this year. But truthfully, attackers are going to throw out as many, if it's a business email compromise attack, they're going to send their net far and wide and try and hit as many people as humanly possible. And primarily, it's going to be the smaller organizations that are going to get hit and feel the pains. It's crazy that there isn't one singular. I will say that attackers, long gone are the days that attackers are wearing dark hoodies, black hoodies, matrix text over the face, thousands of screens, and they're in a basement somewhere. They're sophisticated groups of individuals that use the social climate to influence who they attack. So we saw it last year that during the height of COVID, a lot of healthcare was being attacked. We saw it recently, the Irish healthcare service, JP, right, that was attacked and brought down. They're very intelligent individuals that do the most damage at the most inopportune times because they know that it'll kick people to pay.
Yeah. I mean, and that is very true, James. I mean, Robin has just asked a question around, are small businesses particularly targeted, as we only seem to hear about the big ones in the news. We're seeing what we see is kind of like a cluster effect.
Right.
So when one small business gets compromised, what then happens is their customers and their suppliers tend to, in a short period of time, then get targeted because those attackers are leveraging all that knowledge that they're gathering by sitting there and monitoring these emails to see who's doing business with who, what large projects are going on, etc. And then they're being very targeted from that. So that particularly when you talk about small business having probably less budget available for cybersecurity, and fewer people and fewer checks and balances necessarily involved in paying money out, etc. And there's also a level of kind of familiarity because I know how I end my emails to certain suppliers and certain customers, and that they get used to my language. Well, if the attacker sits there and waits long enough, then they can learn that pattern and move past it. So I think small business is just as vulnerable as big business. It doesn't end up on the news in the same way, but it's happening to all sorts of organisations across the board.
Yeah, and the other thing we didn't touch on, Stephen, is downtime is a real issue. So again, when something happens and an event like ransomware gets remediated, the downtime can actually be 50 times greater than the ransom itself. So, you know, the average length of time when a business is compromised to when they get remediated is 60 days. 6 days is such a long time without being a business, let alone 60. So again, when you think of cost, it's the basic cyber hygiene efforts, training your staff, having conversations. Conversations like this, driving awareness within your organization, can be one of the single biggest, you know, positive things you can do, because again, it's you know, free and easy. Have conversations with anyone on the call today, making sure that you have conversation with your staff around awareness, just as you said, Stephen, some of those key pieces.
We've got another couple of questions here. Again, Robin's followed up, says, does an effective attack have to specifically target a specific business? I suppose the answer is no. If you fish and put your net, you know, far and wide, then of course you'll get pickups. But where it's most effective, the highest hit rate, is if you can tailor that stuff. So, you know, if for example, I mean, I'll tell anybody who'll listen, and lots who won't want to, that I'm into my triathlon. If I was crafting an email phishing attack to target somebody like me, then I'm going to plaster it with Ironman logos and that kind of thing, and talk about an event that I might be going to, etc. You know, the specificity helps.
Yeah.
Make it much more present. At least that's what I would imagine from an attacker's point of view.
Yeah.
And we just got a follow up here as well. Is there anything I can do to protect myself from litigation should my company suffer a data breach? That's a good question. James, JP, do you have a particular view on that at all?
I mean, I'll touch on it first, James, if you like. You know, I think there's a couple of key things that we've gone through today that, let's touch on the litigation piece in a moment, but taking a proactive stance, like it's no longer okay not to do anything. So when small businesses are taking that proactive stance, so for example, you talk about email protection, Stephen, that you know those controls, ensuring that you're having the whether it's when we think about data protection and we think about, for example, an investigation and, for example, litigation and all of those pieces, what helps demonstrate a defense, let's call it, is about having the right posture, the right controls in place. No one's perfect. Getting, like we talked, level 1 to level 5, you don't jump from 1 to 5. But staying still is not an option. You have to keep moving forward. So there are some of the things that we're seeing when you think about the narrow focus on litigation, is really around making sure that you're taking that proactive stance. The other piece, I think, is you're going to see more and more third-party due diligence if you haven't already. You touched on it. So as we're you know, a business, your customers are going, if they have not already, begin to ask you questions around your cyber posture. So the standard is raising, it has been raised, and like we talked about, whether it's regulations or your customers asking, they're the key components to making sure that you're protected, number one, but in the event that you're in certain situations, like you mentioned, there's a defense there, that you picked a framework that makes sense, and a proactive approach across people, process, and technology.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. A lot of UK government and public sector contracts now require you to have at least cyber essentials as a framework in place. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a widespread understanding that cyber attacks, the best will in the world, people fall victim to them. But what have you been doing to reduce that risk is going to be really key. And something like Cyber Essentials Plus, that makes a big difference. You can, at least you can demonstrate it, can't you? Look, I've taken steps to reduce and mitigate my risk. Obviously, I can't eliminate my risk entirely, unless I stop using computers. Then you know those are the sorts of things that I think people should probably do.
Great.
And we've got another question here, James. This might be right up your street. What is worse, phishing or spearfishing?
My internet might be a little screwy, so hopefully you can hear
You're
me.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So phishing and spearfishing are two different elements of the same attack type. Phishing is kind of, Stephen, we both use the terminology net, far and wide. So phishing is where I'm going to fire out to everyone and anyone and try and get people to buy. And it'll be a very generic email type, PayPal, for example, log in now, otherwise your PayPal account will be deleted, and blah, 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 blah. Spearfishing is singularly based towards primarily an organization where there's been a lot of push behind it, and a lot of social engineering, a lot of reconnaissance to make sure that the attack is specific enough that someone would 100% click it. So, sending, you find out that such and such organization is using NatWest as a bank, for example. That primarily, they log in on the first Friday of the month, things like that. Yeah. So first Friday of the month, a NatWest looking email will come out, and it will be aimed at the finance people in the organization. That is a spearfish. That is, pinpoint accurate to everything within that organization, making sure that someone will click it. Both are just as bad as each other. There is no way that one of them is worse than the other. It's just the levels of complexity behind them and the likelihood that someone will indeed actually click something and fall victim to that attack.
No, absolutely. No, so that gives us a good feel. Well, look, guys, unless there's any more questions, I'm conscious that we've overrun a little bit. I would again encourage everybody to get in touch if you want to speak with us in more detail and review your own position and assess, what are you doing, what's available to you to improve that. Then if you contact us, the details should be on your screen right now, and we can go from there. But really, from me, guys, thank you ever so much. I think James, the demo was fantastic. JP, your insights really helpful. Thank you very much for spending the time with us.
Thank you for having us, Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah, been a pleasure.
No worries. Marvelous. Thanks very much, all.
Cheers all.
Bye.